1964. Chrysler's Highland Park facility, Michigan. Behind locked doors, a small team of engineers is working on something NASCAR will never see coming. On the dyno sits an engine that looks nothing like the legendary 426 Hemi everyone knows. This one has dual overhead cams, Formula One-style valve actuation, and a goal that sounds impossible: 7,000 RPM and 600 horsepower from a production-based V8. The engine code, A925, and it was supposed to change everything. Instead, it became Chrysler's most expensive secret, a forgotten masterpiece that was banned before it ever turned a wheel in competition. This is the story of the Hemi engine that could have dominated racing for a decade, and why you've probably never heard of it. The problem: Ford was about to ruin everything. To understand why Chrysler built the A925, you need to understand what was happening in 1963. The 426 Hemi had just been developed for NASCAR, a pure racing engine with hemispherical combustion chambers that made massive power. But Ford was working on something even more extreme: the 427 SOHC camera engine. Single overhead cams per bank, huge valves, and power that would embarrass everything Chrysler had. Chrysler's engineers knew the 427 SOHC was coming, and they knew the pushrod 426 Hemi, as good as it was, couldn't compete with overhead cam technology at high RPM. They needed something revolutionary. So they started a secret project, not just to match Ford, but to obliterate them. The solution: build a Formula One engine for NASCAR. The A925 wasn't just an upgraded Hemi, it was a complete reimagining. Chrysler took the basic 426 cubic inch architecture and added dual overhead camshafts, one for intake valves, one for exhaust. Each cylinder had 4 valves instead of 2, just like Formula One engines of the era. The valve actuation used bucket tappets rather than rocker arms, allowing much higher RPM without valve float. The engineering targets were insane for a pushrod-era NASCAR engine: 7,000 RPM redline, 600+ horsepower, and the ability to sustain those RPM for 500-mile races. For context, the standard 426 Hemi made around 425 horsepower and ran out of breath around 6,500 RPM. The combustion chambers retained the hemispherical design, hence the Hemi name, but with better breathing than any American V8 had ever achieved. Each cam was gear-driven off the crankshaft for precision timing at high RPM. On paper, it was perfect. In reality, it was too good. The catch: NASCAR saw it coming. Here's where the story gets interesting. Chrysler wasn't subtle about development. Word leaked to NASCAR officials that both Ford and Chrysler were building exotic overhead cam engines, and NASCAR, terrified of an arms race that would price out smaller teams, made a preemptive strike. In early 1965, before the A925 ever raced, NASCAR announced new rules: no overhead cam engines, no exotic valve configurations, production-based pushrod engines only. The ruling was specifically designed to ban the Ford SOHC and Chrysler A925 before they could dominate the sport. NASCAR officials claimed it was about maintaining the production car connection. Everyone knew the truth. Ford and Chrysler had scared them. Chrysler had spent millions developing the A925, built prototypes, tested on dynos, and now it was illegal before it ever fired up on a racetrack. What happened next? The project disappeared. This is where the A925 story gets murky. How many engines were actually built? Some sources say 3 prototypes, others claim as many as 10. Chrysler never officially acknowledged the program. It was too embarrassing to admit they built something NASCAR banned before they could use it. A few former Chrysler engineers later said, "The A925 was the best engine we ever designed, and NASCAR made sure no one would ever know." Instead of racing the A925, Chrysler went back to the drawing board and developed the street Hemi, the 426 Hemi with lower compression, milder cam, and production car reliability. That's the engine that became legendary. The A925 was forgotten. The other forgotten Hemi engine, the Australian HEMI-6. While we're talking about forgotten Hemi engines, there's another story most people don't know. In 1970, Chrysler Australia developed the HEMI-6, an inline-six engine with semi-hemispherical combustion chambers. It wasn't a V8, it was a straight six designed to compete with Australian Ford and Holden performance cars. The top version, the E49 six-pack, used triple Weber carburetors and produced 302 horsepower from just 265 cubic inches. That's better than 1 horsepower per cubic inch from a naturally aspirated inline-six in 1971. It could rev to 6,500 RPM and embarrassed plenty of V8s in Australian racing. Why didn't Americans know about it? Because it was never sold in the US. Chrysler Australia developed it specifically for local racing homologation rules. Today, HEMI-6 engines are legendary in Australia, but virtually unknown in America. Another forgotten chapter of Hemi history. The modern mystery, the Gen 4 Hemi that almost happened. Fast forward to 2023. Dodge was working on something secret, a 4th-generation Hemi. According to leaked information and insider reports, the Gen 4 Hemi was designed with direct injection, hybrid compatibility, and the ability to meet modern emission standards while maintaining performance. It would have been turbo-ready from the factory and capable of insane power with simple modifications. But then, Stellantis, Dodge's parent company, killed the project. Instead of developing the Gen 4 Hemi, they decided to go all in on electric and turbocharged inline-six engines. The Gen 4 Hemi was canceled before production, joining the A925 and HEMI-6 in the graveyard of forgotten Mopar masterpieces. One industry insider said, "The Gen 4 Hemi would have carried Dodge for another decade. Instead, they killed it for corporate reasons." The legacy. What could have been? Here's what makes the A925 story so frustrating. Chrysler proved they could build an overhead cam V8 that rivaled European race engines. They had the engineering talent, the resources, and the motivation. But NASCAR's rule change killed it before anyone could see what it was capable of. If the A925 had been allowed to race, would it have changed NASCAR history? Would Chrysler have dominated the late 1960s instead of Ford and Mercury? Would overhead cam technology have come to American V8s 30 years earlier? We'll never know. Somewhere in a private collection, an A925 engine might still exist, silent, forgotten, never having fulfilled its purpose. The Hemi's forgotten twin, a legend that never got to prove itself.